Pam Bondi silences Hillary Clinton. She's toast. 33,000 emails deleted. 4 dead Americans in Benghazi, $145 million funneled into a so-called charity. And not a single apology. Not a single charge. Not a single moment of accountability. But not today. Today, Hillary Rodham Clinton isn't standing behind a podium, basking in applause. She isn't launching a book tour or grinning on a late-night comedy show, cracking jokes with celebrity hosts. Today, she sits in silence, under oath. No cameras for selfies, no friendly journalists to spin the moment, only the nation watching, eyes fixed, breath held. This isn't Congress. It's not a courtroom. It's something far more raw, far more unprecedented. The National Tribunal for Accountability, a people's court, summoned in the aftermath of a seismic political shift, formed in the wake of President Trump's return, not as a media stunt, but as a final reckoning, not for partisan applause, but for justice, real justice, the kind that can't be canceled, the kind that outlives headlines. The chamber is packed, every seat filled, every screen in America broadcasting live. This isn't just a hearing, it's an exorcism. At the center, Hillary Clinton, not as a leader, not as a candidate, but as a defendant facing the legacy she spent decades building and burying. Across from her stands Pam Bondi, calm, cold, collected. Not a senator, not a pundit, but a special prosecutor, armed with what the justice system never dared to touch: the receipts, the files, and finally the microphone. Madam Secretary, Bondi begins, her voice even but sharp like a scalpel. I'm not here to relitigate your legacy. I'm here to expose what that legacy tried to erase. Behind her, the screen flickers to life. Subject lines, thousands of them. Emails Hillary Clinton swore were harmless, personal, boring, wedding plans, and yoga routines. But as the screen scrolls, the audience leans in. There's nothing boring about a subject line that reads, arms deal, urgent timeline, or another, foundation, donor meeting confirmed. Bondi continues, no hesitation. You operated a private, unsecured email server while serving as Secretary of State. When it became public, you deleted 33,000 emails. Your team destroyed phones with hammers. You bleach-bit the trail. You didn't cooperate. You concealed. You lied. Silence. Heavy. Palpable. The kind that says, we've waited years for this moment. This wasn't carelessness, Bondi presses. It was calculation. Strategic erasure. You knew exactly which emails needed to disappear, and you made sure they did. Clinton shifts slightly in her seat, her fingers locked. Expression unreadable. Then she speaks. Flatly. Procedurally. There was no classified material in those emails. That's been established. Bondi doesn't blink. No, Madam Secretary. What's been established is that you were never prosecuted. She turns to the room, to the nation. The FBI confirmed 110 of those emails contained classified information. 8 were top secret. And you deleted them without oversight, without consequence. If anyone else had done what you did, they'd be in prison. And that's the core of it, isn't it? Because Hillary Clinton isn't anyone. She's a Clinton, the name that always walks free. The name shielded by power, media, and fear. Bondi clicks again. Another email fills the screen. Donor follow-up. Qatar, Foundation request. It's timestamped just days before Clinton approved a weapons deal with the Qatari government. Coincidence? Or commerce? Bondi delivers the line like a blade. This is what control looks like. She's not shouting. She doesn't need to. The facts scream louder than any rhetoric. The deletion wasn't random. It wasn't a tech issue. It was a data cleansing. A calculated purge designed to bury the smoking guns linking diplomacy to dollars. But this isn't even the part that chills the room. That's still coming. Bondi steps back, breathes, then lowers the hammer. Madam Secretary, she says quietly, we haven't even started on Benghazi, but we will. And you know exactly what's coming. The screen behind her fades to black. Then it lights up again. Not with documents, not with emails, but with faces. 4 of them. Ambassador Christopher Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, Glenn Doherty. No music, no narration, just names. Dates. Silence. They didn't die in battle, Bondi says. They died begging for help. And silence answered. The chamber doesn't move. Not a breath. Because everyone remembers Benghazi. But not like this. Not with the receipts. Bondi begins. From March to September 2012, your department received over 600 requests for additional security from Libya. Many came directly from Ambassador Stevens. All of them were ignored. The email proof flashes behind her, then the footage. Andrews Air Force Base. 4 flag, draped caskets. Hillary Clinton standing beside them, telling grieving families that the attack was caused by a spontaneous protest over an internet video. Bondi clicks again. Another email, same night, from Hillary Clinton to her daughter. Quote, "2 of our people were killed today in Benghazi by an Al-Qaeda-like group. 2 narratives. 2 versions of the same moment. One for the cameras, one for the truth." Bondi doesn't yell. She doesn't need to. "You didn't wait for intelligence," she says. "You didn't wait for facts. You knew the truth. And you buried it. The press ran with the lie. The filmmaker was arrested. The grieving families were told a bedtime story while the real threat remained unspoken. This wasn't confusion," Bondi says. "It was deception." Clinton shifts again. Her voice this time more formal. "Security decisions were made by the appropriate regional bureaus." Bondi doesn't even pause. "And those bureaus reported to you." It's a fortress of plausible deniability. Bureaucratic fog. But today, the fog is lifting. You were briefed. You were warned. And when the consulate called for help, you sent silence. Bondi looks directly at Clinton. This wasn't just a policy failure. It was a fatal one. She steps forward, her voice colder now. "Do you remember what Ambassador Stevens wrote 1 month before he died?" "Because I do." The screen shifts again. This time, video low, resolution draining Clinton, standing over 4 caskets. Cameras flashing, families crying, saying the attack was sparked by a video. And Bondi whispers into the microphone, "You lied to grieving parents while emailing your daughter the truth." No rebuttal. No objection, just silence. The kind that feels radioactive. And Bondi isn't done. "This wasn't about confusion," she says. "This was about control." That's what defines the Clinton doctrine. Not service. Control. Control over narratives. Control over truth. Control over consequences. And in this chamber, for the first time, that control is slipping. The lights fade. The screen goes black. Part 1 ends not with a shout, but with a silence too loud to ignore. And the country leans forward. Because we haven't even begun to talk about the money, about the foundation, about the uranium. The reckoning has just begun. The lights dimmed. The screen behind Pam Bondi went black. The tribunal chamber held its breath, not in anticipation, but in recognition. Recognition that something irreversible had just occurred. That silence, so often used to shield the powerful, had finally turned on its master. And yet, even as that silence spoke volumes, Bondi's voice returned precise, deliberate, cutting through the darkness like a scalpel. "You lied to grieving parents while emailing your daughter the truth." She let the moment hang, the weight of it pressing into every corner of the room. Then she stepped forward again. And that, she said, was just the beginning. The screen lit back up, not with numbers, not with files, but with names etched in digital solemnity. Christopher Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, Glenn Doherty, 4 men who served their country, 4 men who died in Libya on the night of September 11, 2012. Not in combat, not in some fog of war accident, but in an avoidable massacre. One foreseen, one warned against, one ignored. They didn't just die, they were allowed to die. Pam Bondi turned back to the room, her voice low but resolute. For years, the media repackaged Benghazi as a tragedy of circumstance, a fog of war moment, a spontaneous riot sparked by a viral video. But here today, we bring fog into focus. The screen behind her lit up with hundreds of email lines, all marked Libya, all dated prior to the attack. She gestured to the massive wall of text. These are the 600-plus requests for additional security sent to the State Department between March and September 2012. Over 100 of them came directly from Ambassador Stevens. They weren't vague, they weren't exaggerated, they were desperate, and they were ignored. She tapped again. A highlighted excerpt zoomed in. "The consulate cannot withstand coordinated assault. We need additional security assets now. Ambassador Christopher Stevens, August 15, 2012. Bondi's tone sharpened. He wasn't just predicting an attack, he was begging for protection. And what did he get in response? Click. The screen switched to a calendar, empty blocks where reinforcements should have been scheduled. No action taken, no strategy implemented, nothing. He got nothing. She walked forward slowly, her heels echoing across the silent floor. Clinton sat unmoving, her expression blank. But the stillness around her was no longer in her control. Bondi spoke again. September 11th, 2012. The consulate is attacked. It's coordinated. It's planned. It's deadly. 4 Americans are slaughtered. And within hours, a narrative is born. The screen showed footage of Hillary Clinton at Andrews Air Force Base once again, flanked by flag-draped coffins. This was a spontaneous protest sparked by an internet film. She said to the families, "We're doing everything we can." Bondi didn't flinch. That same night, she said, "You emailed your daughter, Chelsea, and said, quote, 2 of our people were killed today in Benghazi by an al-Qaeda-like group." The contradiction didn't need commentary. It screamed by itself. "You didn't wait for intelligence," Bondi said. "You didn't wait for facts. You crafted the narrative before the bodies were even cold." The screen flashed again this time, showing a memo sent from the Clinton State Department to Susan Rice, outlining talking points for 5 upcoming Sunday show appearances. Bullet point 1. The attacks appear to have been spontaneous, triggered by outrage over an anti-Islam video. Your department pushed that talking point to the media, to Congress, to the world, Bondi said, and you knew it was false. She turned to face Clinton directly. You sacrificed truth for optics, accountability for appearance, reality for press strategy. The audience didn't blink. The nation, watching from living rooms and phone screens, felt the tremor in her words. Bondi walked back to the center. "Do you know what the worst part is?" she asked quietly. It worked. The media echoed the video narrative. Susan Rice repeated it across 5 national broadcasts. The filmmaker? Jailed, silenced, turned into a scapegoat. And the families of the fallen? They left Andrews Air Force Base believing a lie. For weeks, Bondi said, you let that fiction stand unchallenged. And when it began to unravel, you doubled down. She clicked. A graphic appeared on screen timeline of deception. From the initial email warning about Benghazi security to the final press conference blaming a video, the timeline traced every step, every decision, every deflection. This wasn't just a foreign policy failure, Bondi said. It was a full-spectrum disinformation campaign executed not by an enemy of the state, but by its top diplomat. Bondi stood silent for a moment. Then she asked the question that no one else in power had ever dared. Ask on record, why did you lie? Clinton didn't answer, but Bondi did for her. Because the truth would have ended your career. Because it would have shattered the illusion. Because it would have exposed the recklessness at the heart of your leadership. She paused again. You told the world it was a tragedy born of chaos. But the truth? The truth is, it was the consequence of arrogance. Behind her, the screen displayed a final image. The faces of the 4 dead Americans fading to black, one by one. This isn't just about what happened in Benghazi, Bondi said. It's about what died with them. Trust, honor, accountability. She turned back toward Clinton, and that was only the beginning. Because while families buried their sons, your foundation was getting richer, your network stronger. And the cash, it kept coming in. Bondi's voice darkened, cold, surgical. And when we follow the money, we follow you, fade to black. Because what comes next is the Clinton Foundation. And the price of power, the screen faded to black. But the silence did not fade with it. Pam Bondi stood at the center of the tribunal chamber, motionless. Her voice just moments ago had sliced through the fog of Benghazi with ruthless clarity, tearing apart the illusion that the deaths of 4 Americans were the result of chaos. No, they were not collateral damage. They were casualties of calculated neglect and of a cover story more polished than any press release. And now? Now it was time to follow the trail that Benghazi tried to bury. A trail made not of blood, but of money. Bondi took one step forward, eyes locked on Hillary Clinton. While 4 families buried their sons, she said coldly, you were burying something else, the money trail. The screen behind her flickered to life again. This time, not with flames or caskets, but with numbers. Towering stacks of them. Dollar signs, donation entries, wire transfers, foreign flags. And at the center of every connection, the Clinton Foundation. You called it the most transparent charity in the world, Bondi said, her voice laced with sharp precision. Let's test that transparency. She tapped her tablet. A new graphic appeared: foreign donations to the Clinton Foundation 2009-2013, a sprawling web connecting dozens of entities to one central node, Hillary Rodham Clinton, Secretary of State. $32 million from Saudi Arabia, $12 million from Qatar, $8 million from the United Arab Emirates, and $2.35 million from a uranium firm with direct ties to Russia. During your tenure as Secretary of State, Bondi said, while you held the most powerful diplomatic position in the U.S. government, your foundation received over $145 million from foreign governments, lobbying firms, and corporate actors, many of whom had business pending before your department. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because every figure was a confession. Every donation a fingerprint. These weren't random acts of generosity. They were investments, and the return was access. The screen changed again, showing a side-by-side chart. On the left, donation amounts. On the right, dates of weapons approvals, policy meetings, ambassadorial appointments. They matched. Almost perfectly, Bondi continued. This wasn't diplomacy. This was commerce. And your foundation? It didn't operate beside the State Department. It operated through it. For a moment, even Clinton seemed to blink. Pam pressed on. For years, the media framed the Clinton Foundation as a symbol of global philanthropy, a modern marvel of soft power. But what it really was a shadow government. The room tensed. Behind the stage photos and carefully curated charity reports, there was something else. A pay-to-play machine. A transactional pipeline disguised as public service. Bondi walked toward the screen, tapping again. New visuals appeared: emails, receipts, internal memos, confirming that the same foreign donors who wired money to the foundation often received weapons contracts, diplomatic favor, or policy access from the State Department. In multiple instances, she said, governments that donated millions received weapons approvals days later, directly signed off by your office. She turned back to Clinton. You sat at the apex of American diplomacy, and you sold it like a vendor on the street corner. Clinton remained silent. Bondi wasn't finished. Less than 10% of the foundation's budget went to actual charitable grants, she said. The rest? Salaries to consultants, private flights, five-star hotels, speaking fees. The screen shifted again. $250,000 per Wall Street speech, $500,000 for a foreign keynote, $65 million in speaking engagements in under 5 years. While veterans slept in shelters and single mothers chose between rent and baby formula, Bondi said, you were flying private, dining elite, and building a global empire of influence funded by those who wanted one thing: favor. She leaned forward now, her voice colder than before. This wasn't a foundation. It was a front. The tribunal chamber stayed still, frozen beneath the weight of those words. And yet it was only building, because behind the foreign money, behind the foundation's smiling press releases, was a deal that went beyond corruption. A deal that handed America's uranium supply to a hostile nuclear power. A deal that placed national security on the auction block. And a deal that paid millions to the same foundation that had become synonymous with influence. Bondi looked back to the screen, then to the chamber. Let's talk, she said, about Uranium One. And with that, she tapped her tablet. The screen changed. On the left, a glowing map of uranium mine sites across the United States. On the right, a series of donation entries. And above it all, one word in bold white letters: Russia. Because when the foundation was finished collecting from the Middle East, it turned its sights toward Moscow, Russia. The name echoed across the tribunal chamber, projected above the map of America's uranium mines like a final verdict waiting to be read. Pam Bondi stood still, her silhouette framed by glowing dots marking uranium sites, glowing not just with radiation, but with betrayal. Because behind those mine sites lay something far more radioactive than any isotope, the deal that connected American national security to Russian control and millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation. She turned to the screen again. The heading flashed, Uranium One. This wasn't just another donation, Bondi said. This was a geopolitical transaction of catastrophic consequence, and it happened under Hillary Clinton's watch. The map zoomed in, highlighting the locations of uranium mines now under the control of a company called Uranium One, a firm that, in 2010, was quietly acquired by Rosatom, Russia's state-owned nuclear agency. Let's be clear, Bondi continued. This wasn't just about mining rights. This was about control over nearly 20% of America's uranium production capacity, and that control was handed to a foreign adversary. She paused. The air hung heavy. But here's the part they never wanted you to connect. This deal didn't just require casual approval. It required sign-off from a very specific group. The screen changed again, this time listing the members of the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFI-US. Bondi tapped the name at the top, U.S. Secretary of State, Hillary Rodham Clinton. That's you, she said quietly. Clinton sat still, her fingers tense, but unmoved. You claim you weren't involved. You claim you didn't know, but your own emails say otherwise. The screen flickered again this time, showing internal correspondence between Clinton's staff, discussing talking points for the deal, briefing memos, and donation notifications from one name, Frank Giustra, the chairman of Uranium One, a longtime Clinton ally and donor. Bondi's voice now cut with steel. Between the announcement of the Russian acquisition and the final government approval, Frank Giustra funneled $2.35 million to the Clinton Foundation, quietly, in separate installments. And in direct violation of a transparency agreement you had previously signed, she let the number sit in the air, $2,350,000. The screen zoomed in on the Foundation's donor ledger. There was no entry for Giustra, no record of the payments during the critical window of the Uranium One approval. You didn't disclose it. You didn't recuse yourself. You didn't step away. Instead, your team helped craft the messaging, briefed the press, and prepared responses. Bondi turned to the room. This wasn't ignorance. This was orchestration. She clicked her tablet again. The screen displayed a timeline: donations, approvals, statements, all perfectly aligned. And at the center, a name that never left the screen, Clinton. This is what a conflict of interest looks like when it's dressed in pearls and power suits. It's not a clerical error. It's an intentional circumvention of ethics designed to protect access and sell influence. Then Bondi looked directly at Clinton. You've said again and again that nothing illegal occurred, that this was debunked, that no wrongdoing was proven. But what you call debunked, the American people see for what it really is. Protected. She stepped forward, lowering her voice. Because the real scandal isn't just the deal, it's the silence that followed it. The media called it a conspiracy theory. Congress let it fade into procedural dust. But the uranium was gone. The money had changed hands. And the American people never got a full explanation. Ask yourself this, Bondi said. If any other politician had transferred 20% of America's uranium to Russia, while their personal foundation received millions from the deal's beneficiaries, would they still be walking free? She didn't wait for an answer. We both know they wouldn't. Clinton's expression remained unchanged, stoic. But it was no longer commanding. It was cornered. This wasn't about oversight, Bondi continued. It was about immunity. You didn't just sell uranium. You sold out the system meant to stop you. She stepped back as the screen darkened once more. But Uranium One wasn't the most dangerous transaction, she said, because while that deal threatened national security, she tapped again. The next one threatened democracy itself. The chamber shifted. No more mind maps. No more donor logs. Just a name in white text against a navy blue background, Perkins Coie, $1.02 million. Bondi's voice returned, steady and solemn. Let's talk, she said, about how $1 million lie almost tore the country apart. $1.02 million. That was the price tag. Not for humanitarian aid. Not for foreign diplomacy. But for a weapon, a narrative weapon, engineered not to inform, but to destroy. Pam Bondi stood beneath the screen displaying those 6 figures, unflinching. The tribunal chamber, once restless, now held still with a tension so thick it felt carved into the walls. In the last part, she said, voice low and deliberate, We traced the deal that handed America's uranium to a hostile nuclear power and the millions that changed hands under the cover of a charitable foundation. She turned toward Hillary Clinton. But this was different. This wasn't a backdoor deal for minerals. This was a political assassination attempt, funded, crafted, and deployed from within your campaign. The screen behind her shifted again, this time tracing the money trail: Clinton, campaign, Perkins, Coa Fusion, GPS, Christopher Steele. Bondi didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The evidence had already begun to speak for itself. You didn't just want to win the 2016 election, she said. You wanted to scorch the earth beneath your opponent. The screen lit up with a new graphic, the Steele dossier, and beneath it, bold red text, unverified, uncorroborated, used anyway. This wasn't opposition research. This was a political grenade wrapped in the language of national security, and you were the one who pulled the pin. Bondi clicked again. The dossier's most salacious, unverifiable allegations filled the screen, page after page, each labeled, "Not confirmed by FBI, lacks substantiation, disputed by primary sources." "Let me be very clear," Bondi said. "The Steele dossier was never verified, not before the election, not after. And yet, your campaign paid over $1 million to bring it to life, hand it to your media allies, and feed it into the bloodstream of the FBI." She turned to face Clinton directly. "And you didn't just smear a man, you infected an entire nation." The screen flashed again, this time showing a FISA court warrant. Bondi tapped the corner. This warrant authorized federal surveillance of a Trump campaign advisor based not on fact, but on your fiction. A fiction written overseas, funded through cutouts, and presented as intelligence. The room was silent, but the weight of her words grew louder with each beat. "You weaponized America's intelligence apparatus," Bondi continued. "You hijacked our justice system to pursue a political opponent. And for 5 years, our nation lived under the shadow of a lie." She clicked again. News headlines exploded across the screen. "Trump? Russian asset? Collusion confirmed? The walls are closing in." Bondi gestured toward them. The media didn't investigate. They amplified. They didn't question. They echoed. They didn't verify. They televised fiction as gospel because you gave them the story to tell. The screen shifted again. Direct quotes from CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Atlantic, all spinning the dossier like prophecy. "You lit the match," Bondi said, "and the press carried the flame." Her voice lowered now, heavy with intent. "They said Trump was a threat to democracy. But the real threat, the real destabilizer, the real architect of distrust was the lie you sold them." Bondi stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "You didn't lose in 2016 and move on. You refused to concede. You refused to accept that the American people chose someone else. So you rewrote the story and you wrote yourself as the victim." The screen faded into black again. Then a new image appeared. Hillary Clinton. Interview quote, "He's not a legitimate president." Bondi stared directly at her. "You called him illegitimate, not once, not in anger, but methodically. On talk shows, at rallies, in books, in front of millions." She turned to the tribunal chamber. "And with every repetition, you didn't just attack a man, you eroded the very foundation of peaceful transition." Bondi walked slowly now, letting her words stretch like a wire under tension. This wasn't just dirty politics. This was sedition packaged for prime time. The screen switched again, showing congressional hearings, Russia probes, the Mueller report, years of division and distrust. "All of it," Bondi said, "fueled by a document you knew was false. And when it began to collapse, when the cracks became undeniable, you blamed everyone but yourself." Bondi stopped. "For 5 years," she said, "this country was dragged through investigations, impeachments, and chaos, all rooted in a lie you helped create, fund, and distribute." She paused, not for drama, but for emphasis. "The damage?" she asked, glancing across the chamber. "It wasn't just political, it was cultural. Families divided, trust shattered, institutions discredited." She turned back to Clinton. "And not once did you stand before the American people and say the words that matter more than any other in a democracy: 'I was wrong.'" The screen behind her faded into a final collage. Hillary Clinton on talk shows, at book launches, on stage at glitzy conferences, smiling, deflecting, Still above it all, Bondi's voice grew quiet, razor sharp. You didn't just survive the scandals, you monetized them. You turned controversy into currency. You taught a generation that accountability is for the powerless, and that if your name is Clinton, truth is optional. The final slide appeared, a single phrase in white letters on a black screen. This wasn't politics, this was the blueprint. Bondi took one last step forward, her voice now steady and conclusive. This wasn't just about what you did, Madam Secretary. It was about what you taught others to believe, that power is permanent, that truth is flexible, and that consequences are only for those who lose. She looked around the chamber, but today, you lost. No applause, no cheers, just silence. The kind that doesn't beg for justice because it is justice. And then the screen went dark. The story was told. History, at last, had caught up.